Folding table. I like it. Okay, I don't know if Becca's going to be here. Okay. Oh, too loud. Sorry. I'd like to convene the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board here for the Committee of the Whole here on April 17th at 5 p.m. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Commissioner Elper, absent. Commissioner Menz.
Here.
Commissioner Musich.
Present.
Commissioner Olson.
Here.
Commissioner Rucker, absent. Commissioner Schaefer.
Here.
Commissioner Thompson, absent. Vice President Abeni.
Here.
President Forney.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Commissioner Rucker and Commissioner Benny are away, or not Benny, excuse me, Alper. One of those A words, sorry about that. Anyway, so we are beginning our day one of our retreat, and we will begin with Superintendent
Should we
Bangor.
approve the agenda?
Oh, I guess we should do that. Approve the agenda.
So I'd like to move the agenda for approval.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Signify it. Thank you. Opposed? That action carries. Okay, so we will start with Superintendent Bangor. It's been a long one day. Sorry, gang. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you, President Forney and Commissioners. It's great to see you all and very excited to begin our budget process. Maybe excited is too much of a big word, but I'm really looking forward to it and working with you all. And it's really a pleasure to be here. And let's get started on our budget. So, of course, as a committee of the whole for our 25-26 budget retreat. And I want to start off with just giving some context. So this is really the first 2 years of budget process that we're doing from 2025 and 2026. Typically, as a board, we do 1 year, but we are matching up with the city's process, and so this is going to be a 2-year budget process for us. And it's the first time doing this, and so it's going to be robust, and I'm sure we'll have some really good discussions as we go through this budget process this year. So this is the first 2 years of the this is the final 2 years of the 2023 and 2026 strategic direction that you as a board have adopted for the direction for myself, which I measured upon, and the organization. And those are your directions and your priorities for this organization. So in preparation, of course, for the budget retreats, staff have provided study reports to the board for compensation, for budget process, fund histories, and budget issues and funding needs. And I also would be remiss if I don't say thank you to wonderful finance staff, and of course, Director Weissman and all the staff that have put a lot of work into that to make sure that we give you as much information as possible before we get to today. So I hope that has been helpful to this board, and I'm sure it'll help us lead in discussion around our budget process. Some things that are to be aware of course, as we've talked about around economic conditions that are affecting the park board, our property tax pressures that we have discussed, and of course, funding needs that will require, of course, thoughtful consideration by this board and result in, of course, a more difficult budget process for the next couple of years. We have some challenges ahead of us, and as we go through the budget process in the next 2 retreats that we have today and our next one, we will identify those, and of course, we'll be having further discussion on that. For this particular budget retreat day one today, we really want to set the base for budget discussion. So that's really the objective of the beginning of this, is to really set the base of the foundation of what we're going to be talking about. We want to reground ourselves in the work we've already done as an organization. And so we'll be talking about that and really reviewing the work and the accomplishments that we have already been in process with and what we are doing as an organization. We also want to obtain input on the board's priorities as we have this discussion, which of course is very important. On the budget retreat day 2, we want to continue to reground the board on, and ourselves on the work we've already accomplished. To make sure, of course, that we continue to talk about the work that this organization and this board has set for priorities and what we continue to work on. We want to refine the input from the board on those priorities. So as we are having the discussions, we will then, talk about refining or readjusting the budget. The light's great. Yeah, they're up so we will also be refining the budget with, of course, the board's input to make sure that we are addressing the board's considerations and the important work that we have to do going forward. But more importantly, too, of course, we want to obtain the board's input to guide the direction for the 2025-2026 budget, including, of course, compensation framework, current service level, which is always important to us, of course, and the maximum property tax levy request by this board. At the end of the day, that's going to be where we want to accomplish by the second day of the retreat. So some key information I want to share with you to make sure as we're going forward for you as commissioners is the 2025-2026 priorities within the 2023 to 2026 strategic directions, and then within the potential recommendations for revisions to or pause any of the budget actions. So as we have the discussion and we're going through that, there might be some adjustments to those priorities, some revisions, or depending on what the board would recommend, of course, we will have that discussion around your priorities on the strategic directions. And also a direction to link the priorities to property taxes, other ongoing funding or one-time funding or operating decreases, right? So there's going to be key places we're going to be looking at as we have our discussion. And then, of course, at the end of this all, the direction from the board for the maximum property tax levy request that we bring into the mayor and having discussion, of course, with the mayor's team and our team going forward. So with that, I am now going to turn this over to Director Weissman, and I look forward to our discussion. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to the work with you all. Thank you.
Good evening, President Forney and Commissioners. I will begin this evening with a brief review of the pre-retreat presentations that were provided to the Administration and Finance Committee. The goal of these presentations was to provide background and base information as you began thinking about the 2025-2026 budget development process. Compensation 101 overview was provided on March 6th. Budget process and fund history was provided on March 20th. These are the two areas that I'm going to be briefly reviewing with you right now. The 2025 and 2026 budget issues have been further refined and will be part of your exercise and input after the break this evening. So the compensation overview. Annual wage increase is provided for job categories as determined by the collective bargaining units. For non-represented and appointed staff, the superintendent determines those increases, and the commissioner determines the increase for the superintendent. For the MPRB, this has been 2 to 3% per year, and we are starting to see larger increases beginning in 23 and 24. For example, the city of Minneapolis has approved labor contracts that have a 4.5% increase, annual wage increase in 2024. Step increases, most positions have a limited number of steps that an individual progresses through during the initial years of employment. These steps are typically between 4 and 4.5%. So for an employee who is in step increases and they would receive an annual wage increase, for example, of 3% and a step increase of 4%, That's additive, so that employee would receive a 7% increase for that given year. Reclassifications is a process of determining if a person's job description is reflective of the work they are being asked to do or authorized to do. This is a focus on job descriptions or job duties versus compensation. And reclassifications can result in no change or result in a change that moves the position into a wage range and could result in a change of salary, either up and in rare cases down. A market study is the process of comparing the job categories at the MPRB against relevant positions to determine if the MPRB's wage range is within the market for that position. The MPRB is entering into a PSA for a market-based wage study to be completed in 2024. The previous study was done in 2019. So as you consider compensation in this budget process, again, I'll remind you that the general fund is heavily reliant on property taxes, and wages and fringe in our general fund is 72% of that expenditure budget. A 1% general wage or annual wage increase for all employees would be approximately $600,000, which equates to about 5.45 positions or a 0.73 property tax increase. And if all positions were provided a 5% annual wage increase, it would equate to approximately $3 million or 27 full-time positions or a 3.65 property tax levy increase. So the outcomes of compensation that we are desiring is to attract diverse and talented individuals at the forefront of our industry, so talent acquisition. Market placement, we want to be competitive and have wages at the top of MPRB range to retain that top talent. And also we would like to alleviate pressures between employee supervisor pay rates at all levels of the organization. And finally, to ensure equitable pay ratios between employees from historically marginalized communities and employees of non-racialized backgrounds. So now I'll provide a brief history of the budget process and funds. So as the superintendent said, we are developing our first two-year budget. It will result in the adoption of the 2025 annual budget and adoption of a 2026 plan. We are currently in the information and gathering part of the process. We are providing you with projections, with issues and budget needs. We provided the board study reports. We have had a pre-meeting with city staff. Budget retreats are today and May 1st. And the city assessor will be presenting on April 24th. And then budget information will be shared with employees. And we will have our meeting with the mayor and his staff. The next part of the process is the development process, where after we receive the input from the commissioners, we will identify impacts and refine estimates so that we can bring forth a resolution to the board on admin and finance on July 10th and full board on the 24th that will recommend the maximum property tax levy for 2025. The mayor releases his recommended budget on August 15th, and then staff begin development of the individual department budgets, and the BET sets the 2025 maximum property tax levy on September 18th. And then on October 23rd of this year, the superintendent will present his recommended budget, and we will go into a series of public comment and review by the board and the public on November 6th, November 20th, and December 4th, where we would expect the Admin and Finance Committee to approve the 2025 budget and 26 plan, as well as the 2025 property tax levy on December 4th, and the full board would adopt it on December 10th. These dates can change. We are working with the city to make sure we stay up to date with any potential changes that they might make to this schedule, and we would notify you of that if that happens. Commissioner amendments, again, can be submitted anytime before the budget is adopted and should include how the amendment will be funded. Executive team is available to provide professional support, and the board practice has been to present final amendments for consideration no later than December 4th for transparency. So I'm just going to show you, remind you of a couple of slides from our funds history presentation. So this first one is our property tax levy. Over the past 10 years, it's averaged a 5.3% annually, and the city's increase has averaged 5.8%. If you look at the past 5 years, the park board has averaged a 4.7% increase, and the city over that same 5 years has averaged 7.4%. So their property tax levy increases have been higher than the park boards for the last 5 years. Again, this shows property taxes at 79% for the park board, and for the city of Minneapolis general fund, property taxes is only 46% of their general fund budget. As the workforce has recovered from a low point in 2012 and minimum wage has increased, salary and fringe spending has become a larger piece of the operating pie, which is reflected on here. And again, 72% of the 2024 budget is salary and fringe. Wanted to just spend a little bit of time on the full-time employees all funds. As the Great Recession reduced our full-time workforce over a long period of time between 2001 and 2012, it has taken the MPRB a long period of time to restore service levels, and that time has been between 2013 and 2024. In 2017, with NPP 20, 45 positions were added to the general fund, or added to the budget, and largely restored service levels to many of our maintenance functions. And in 2022, the youth investment restored service levels for youth programming. In 2024, we have added, between 2013 and 2024, we have added more full-time employees than we lost over that previous time frame. And this is due to the same level of service being applied to new parks and amenities through our system equity investments. I wanted to show you this enterprise slide to remind us of the work we continue to do within the enterprise fund to improve its financial sustainability. Parking and concessions provide the most consistent and largest net operating income, with the sculpture garden, ice arenas, and now use and event permitting being closely watched and identified as budget issues to be aware of. With that, I will now turn this over to President Forney, Commissioner Menz, and Commissioner Olson as they discuss racial equity and the budget process.
I have a couple questions, if that's okay, first. Okay, Vice President Benny?
Just super picky, detailed questions, but you had the slide about the city percent and the MPRB percent increase, and then you sort of focused in on the 4-year period. But that percentage increase is they're on very different base budgets. So ours was, did you say 5%-ish for over the 4 years?
It's 5 years, and it's 4.7%.
Thank you, on a 100 and, well, not even, because the budget itself is under 100 million from the, and that at the cities is
7.4%.
over a much larger budget. So I think that's worth pointing out. And then the other thing is when you show that graphic's been shown a few times, the staffing levels and how they've rebounded. And I really appreciate you talking about how the level of service, of course, then is rebounded as well. But is there also, isn't anecdotally, the system has also grown during this period of time. I don't know if the system, and I don't know how you'd measure that, if you'd measure that in acreage or what, but certainly from 2003, the system has grown during that period, correct?
President Forney and Commissioner Benning, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
One thing before we get
Please.
to Commissioner Musich, one thing that I forgot to state on the compensation is on May 1st, during Budget Retreat Day 2, staff will be presenting a compensation framework for commissioner review and input. So you can look forward to that during Day 2.
Thank you, Commissioner Musich. You have some questions.
Thank you, President Forney. Since this is the first time that we're going to be doing a 2-year budgeting process, can you help us understand what impacts that will have on the amount of work that we'll have to do next year around budgeting? Like, for example, this year, I think we have 5 or 6 weeks in a row where we're in board meetings through much of the most beautiful part of the year in Minnesota. So I'm wondering if this is going to benefit us in a way that perhaps we get a week off maybe in 25 as part of the budgeting process. Can you help us understand what the benefits are in doing more work this year?
President Forney and Commissioner Musich, the largest benefit is that there is an established plan for 2026. So at the city, when they started theirs in 23 and 24, so for the 2024 budget process, the mayor really narrowly defined what could come forward in the 2024 budget process. I expect that the same thing will happen with us, with this board, that you will look at the 2026 plan and identify if there's any tweaks that need to happen or anything new that has arisen that is requiring adjustment or being looked at. But definitely for staff and the board, there will be less work to do when we get to the 2026 budget process.
So less meetings or the same amount of meetings?
I would suspect less meetings.
Okay, great. That was what I was hoping. Thank you.
Commissioner Menz and Commissioner Olson and I have been meeting for, over a year, on how we can incorporate better racial equity throughout the system, throughout our decision-making, et cetera. And so I don't know if you remember, but last fall, we actually brought forward a recommendation for an amendment a form for making amendments. It wasn't necessarily received wholeheartedly. So we've tried to figure out, okay, how can we maybe help in incorporating better decision-making based upon racial equity. And so we just wanted to introduce that. We have I'll call it a cheat sheet. I'm not sure if that's the best way to refer to it. But anyway, I'll just pass it over. That Joelle Allen helped in incorporating for us. Where did I put the rest of them? Did I pass them around? No, where did I put them?
Do we,
There
not
they are.
everybody has this?
There we go. I'm passing them around.
Okay.
Anyway, so these are basically a checklist, that I think is the best way to be looking at it, of some questions in helping us all individually helping to make decisions. And so I see Commissioner Menz has something he would like to say, but I'd like to have the three of us basically share, what our feelings are about this. Go ahead, Commissioner Menz.
Yes, just so the board knows and the public, this board is choosing to work on racial equity. I mean, we've done some self-examination as well. We've all participated in some trainings, and we're moving forward with Indigenous Reconciliation Plan, which if it continues to be named that, we'll see. But there are things that we're taking as a step, and this is really important to us and as this group that we've been working with, which includes May Brooks and Secretary Ringgold and Superintendent Bangora. I think that last year, President Forney stated that we were given an amendment process to look through to determine racial equity. And it was a tool that was received, it was difficult because it was so right then. So we're trying to take some action to figure out what are ways that commissioners can make sure that proposals or amendments that they're bringing forward are working with staff and also our process around racial equity. So originally the questions we had were from last year's process, which the staff uses. But President Forney and Commissioner Olson recently met with one of our consultants who's terrific and who we should be working with in order to move racial equity forward in the organization and as a board. So I don't know if everybody has had time to look at these at this point, but we're kind of looking for feedback from you all to bring something that would work. Maybe it's a process, maybe it's a form that we submit, but looking for feedback from the commissioners.
Yeah, and just to add that, so these questions are kind of an industry standard, used across a variety of various different industries to arrive at, the best, most equitable, budget conclusions. And so they're just really to guide your framework of your thinking of what we're proposing. It's not, and it's something to make, how I've been looking at it is it's a way to improve the effectiveness of, amendments, budget proposals, priorities, and to be able to better articulate, the need of these specific things. Because if we can answer these questions effectively with whatever the proposal is, that means it's headed in the right direction. So just right now, at this point, just familiarize yourself with them, kind of keep it around as you're looking at it. We'll be discussing it more at the next meeting, providing, some examples that you could use. But, as we go through and you get the presentations, maybe pick out one of these, pick out, Resource distribution, does the budget allocation address existing disparities in resource distribution? How does it prioritize needs based on equity? If you look to past years, can you spot patterns that show the same groups of people being prioritized or neglected? So as we're going through a specific topic, maybe bring that up and start to kind of familiarize yourself with the thought process, because I think last time, as was mentioned, it wasn't completely embraced because it seemed kind of like a put upon, do more work, whatever. But really we see this as something that will benefit our process going forward. So yeah, we hope that you look at it as a beneficial tool as well.
And I guess I'll reiterate that this is not a requirement, okay? It is a guide. And this is a guide for you individually. It's not meant to cross-examine staff, let's say. Well, have we done these things? Are we about this? No, this is about your own reflection on our budget. So please, please understand that. And then I also wanted to comment, first of all, Director Weisman, thank you for walking us through. When we did our, what should we say, training, onboarding, that was what it was called. Anyway, I remember that I said, let's try for 3 wins. And I just want you all to know, I'm very, very proud of what we have already set forward and accomplished. I mean, stormwater and parkways are huge, and they are making some real economic difference. We made that difference. And so we might be in a place that we might be pausing some of our strategies or reviewing them or whatever it might be, but realize that we have accomplished really big things. And I'm real proud of where we're at, and I don't look at this negatively, that these shortfalls. I look at it as maybe an opportunity for us to continue to do the good works we're doing. So on that, unless there's some questions on what we just indicated, we will move on then to, who do we have next? Assistant Superintendent Cap, please come forward.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm here tonight to give you an update on the citywide needs-based free and reduced cost programming strategy. As you know, this was part of a Commissioner budget action, and the action was to identify citywide needs-based free and reduced cost programming strategy for the Minneapolis parks to replace the 3 current programs. The strategy should not add barriers beyond the standard registration process and should consider applying to Minneapolis residents of all ages. And based on the strategy, to develop a policy and procedure recommendation for participation and metrics for determining efficacy of the program to serve residents' needs. We have already begun our work. This is the timeline for the action. We have held stakeholders meetings that included internal stakeholders, including Rec Plus, recreation centers, aquatics, environmental ed, along with finance, visitor services, and our ActiveNet people, and the data insights team. The steps that we are currently working towards are the task force will develop a strategy utilizing input and research. We'll present that proposed strategy to the executive team. Then we will present that proposed strategy and budget impacts to the board. We'll update the strategy based on input and finalize the process and procedures with the goal of rolling out the program for winter spring registration in 2025. I want to remind us all of the 3 current fee assistance programs. The first one is actual fee assistance, where eligibility is determined by meeting certain criteria and income guidelines, completing an application, and providing documentation. The fee waivers are typically for instruction, the instruction portion of the fee, and not the supplies. So there's different scales that are figured out for that fee assistance. Then we have the scholarship fund, which covers up to $300 per person per year, minus a $5 participation fee per activity. Then we have the free program sites. All youth programs and sports are free at 17 Minneapolis parks. Sites were located within areas of concentrated poverty at the inception of this program, and registration is free for anyone 17 and under with a Minneapolis address. Rec Plus also has free and donation-based programs at 3 sites. And those are Weber, Harrison, and Matthews. I had the M in my mind, sorry. So those are the 3 current programs that we are working on a strategy to combine and standardize. Now I'm going to invite Director Hernandez up to talk about, the information that we gleaned from the internal stakeholder meetings and our next steps.
Good evening, Commissioners. As Assistant Superintendent Kolb said, we held a stakeholder meeting with internal partners and received a lot of feedback on some of the options that Assistant Superintendent Kolb just discussed. Some of the challenges that we found just in some of those stakeholder meetings and feedback that we received was just an understanding of the overall goal for the offering free programs, and really understanding, are we reaching that goal and how that goal is being tracked. And so one of the things we talked about is how we can be more intentional in gathering information from those 3 options that were just stated. Also, how staff communicates the 3 options. As we just learned about some of the definitions, it is pretty cumbersome on the information and how we talk about those various programs as well. And then also one thing we found out is because we're serving such a diverse community that the information needs to be translated, and so people from all different cultures and backgrounds can understand that information as well too. One of the other pieces that we found was in regards to the registration piece, we really are not reaching the intended population. And some of the things that we found out in those discussions were that we have people from various parts of the cities that are participating in some of those free sites. And so that's taking away opportunities for people within those communities that would need those programs. Another thing that we found out that people are registering at multiple locations, so there would be multiple families holding spots and then making a decision if they want to sign up for that program and then just not showing up. And that's another thing that we found out, that the no-shows were increased because there is not a commitment of payment. So people are just showing up, or not showing up, for those free programs. An example of that, I just actually talked to one of the rec supervisors, and an example she gave was there was a program that there was 40 people registered for a certain program. The day of the program, only 15 people showed up. And when she was calling families, some of them would just say, oh, we just found another program that we're going to go to. So again, leaving a lot of spaces open for people who really needed that program. And then again, the overall just process is not equitable for all families as well too. And that was discussed during that stakeholder meeting. Another challenge is just from the financial perspective, that overall the negative budget implication for the organization. And then one thing we talked about as well was making decisions based on assumptions. Making decisions based on assumptions of registrants' financial standing. So with that, meaning that if we're saying that it's a free site, there might be families that are willing to pay something, whether it's a $5 amount or even more than that. So we're making assumptions based on just what we think a community might need in their financial standings. One success to the program was just eliminating barriers for some families. And then along with that, just families being able to get to know, get into the rec centers, get to learn about other resources and other programs as well too, which was a benefit. I'll make sure I change it this time. And then ideas from that stakeholder team was just to really pilot with the citywide, with the youth programming, just really to do some type of pilot this year and just see, or next year to see how that works, and then maybe potentially expand it in other areas as well. One other idea was just better communication and marketing and community engagement. Translation, I talked about that earlier, just really making sure that we are looking at how we translate the flyers and the information so we're engaging all people from communities. We also talked about QR codes with audio as well too. Another is to really utilize school liaisons and making sure that we're getting out and working with Minneapolis Public Schools and letting families know about the free programs as well. Another piece that we talked about was the overall discount done through ActiveNet, and we were talking about the task force would vet that process as well. Another piece is just developing process and procedures for the program. Really talk about what the process would look like for people who did not show up, and ensuring that it's equitable and everyone that has an opportunity to participate in the programs as well. Another piece that we looked at was charge a participation fee. So example, I think I talked about that earlier, just even a $5 minimum. So there is some type of commitment for families that are interested in registering for a program. And then just really just talk about training staff for consistency, really ensuring that we're letting the staff know what the purpose is for these free sites and for the free programs as well. And then just next steps. So we're gonna have our first task force meeting is scheduled tomorrow, Thursday, April 18th, to start off like just the discussion and how we wanna move forward. We're gonna use the input from these stakeholder meetings to guide the task force work, and then just research programs of other agencies as well. I have a colleague that works with community education, and we were talking about just how community ed also had free programming, and they looked at actually doing a different option, like levels. And when we talked about assumptions, he said it actually became a revenue generator because they did make assumptions that families couldn't pay, and they found out that families were more willing to pay moving forward. So, and then also we want to develop recommendations that will be presented to the leadership team. So the goal for that task force would, over the next few months, we would meet and come up with a recommendation and then share that recommendation with the leadership team as well. So I am going to pass it off to Director Wiseman, and she'll provide some financial information about these different programs.
So I wanted to just go through some of the financial information that we have.
Director Wiseman, just a
Yes.
moment. I'm sorry, I did not notice. Commissioner Musich, did you have something you wanted to
I
say?
can hold my questions until the end of
Okay.
the presentation. Section, the end of the section.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
All right, so I wanted to just provide an update on some of the funding sources that we have for scholarships, as well as a recommendation for the budget moving forward. So the Lupient Scholarship Fund has a current balance of $95,000. This provides swim lessons. They do charge a $5 participation fee at Lupient Water Park and all of our beaches. It also provides for lifeguard recruitment and training at the Phillips Aquatic Center. Our scholarship fund, it was funded with one-time money and then hoped that ongoing donations would sustain it. Unfortunately, the donation option on ActiveNet isn't necessarily intuitive or inviting. So donations and this was the old ActiveNet, not the new ActiveNet, donations via the donations tab have only totaled $2,305, and then an opt-in for donations at the customer checkout has garnered just over $10,000. So the total donations received since the inception of the program in November of 2021 is just over $12,500. There's a current balance in the scholarship fund of $236,000. And the number of scholarships that were awarded in 2023 was a total of 114, 51 of which were adult and 62 which were youth. So in our general fund 2024 budget, we were able to reduce our donation budget by $522,000 through revenue increases and expenditure reductions. So the out of balance nature in our general fund for the current free programming sites has been adjusted for with the 2024 budget. It leaves about $150,000 budgeted for donations, which seems to be a more reasonable target for getting grants and donations into this program. So looking at Q1 revenues, recreation revenues are ahead of last year by about 10%, and this excludes Rec Plus. Rec Plus revenues are ahead of last year by about 50%, and that is due to fee increases that went into effect the summer of 2023. So we are going to be monitoring those revenues over the course of 2024 and hope to be able to see how they're starting to become more in balance, actuals versus budget. So for the 2025 and 2026 budget development, a successful rollout of a citywide pilot program focusing on youth will impact revenues with more youth benefiting and participating in programs nearer their home. With a new streamlined, understandable program, the revenue impact may be lessened. So currently in your budget needs document, I have recommended that we reduce revenue by $150,000 per year in 25 and 26. That would be a plan of a total of $300,000. Depending on how the revenues are coming in and the benefits of this new program, we may not need it, but I think for prudent planning, we should consider that going into this current budget process.
Commissioner Musich.
Thank you, President Forney. I'm going to need, I think, both Director Kalb and Ms. Hernandez as well, and I'm sorry, I don't know your title. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear on the update that we got tonight. It sounds like things are underway and you're having conversations, but we have not yet identified what the replacement for the programs we have in place now is quite yet. But whatever it is that comes forward, you don't anticipate recommending that it apply to all ages, but rather for the first year, just to youth programming, with the intention that if it's successful and works, that we would expand that to meet the needs of all residents within the city. Is that an accurate summary of what you shared with us this evening?
President Forney, Commissioner Musich, yes, that is an accurate summary. We are working to develop the program. We intend to pilot it with youth because we do need to, keep an eye on the budget impacts of changing this and making it more streamlined and broadened across the city. So then after we know that the plan is working and, generating adequate revenue where we can take on all ages, I think then we would phase that approach in.
Okay, wonderful. And then I apologize, I did not know which one of you said this, but someone had said that the continuing ed group had done something similar where they were asking for people to pay in like a tier based on what they're able to pay. Do you think they'd share that data with us so we'd be able to model based on what they're seeing across the city, what we might see for similar programming within our system?
President Forney, Commissioner Musich. Yes, I actually had planned on having someone come in to our task force
Okay.
to talk about their process. So yes, said they would be willing to share that as well.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yes.
So yeah, I'd love if we could make sure that the finance team gets that information so they can model that for us, so we have kind of a ballpark feeling of what the budgetary impacts might be.
Yeah.
Because I just would like to remind my colleagues, when this was initially proposed, we had no funding source, and we just put basically a $600,000 hole in our budget. And we're still feeling the impacts of that today because what we put in place was not sustainable. And I thank all of you for stepping up and saying we need to find a sustainable path forward for serving the needs of our community. And so I'm excited to see there's been progress being made on this. Thank you for the thoughtful way you're approaching it. And while I would love to see it apply to everyone right away, I do understand that it's probably prudent to try it with a smaller demographic group and make sure that it works before we try to do it on a larger scale. So thank you for that. And I think that was all the questions I had, so thanks.
Thank you. I think it was Commissioner Menz who came, who's laid on first. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I got it wrong.
That's fine by me. I guess a couple of questions I have. Thank you for the presentation. So who do we think will be in the stakeholder meetings? And do we have a list? Do we have a list of folks who would be participating in that process?
Yes, so in the task force moving forward, it will be rec supervisors. We have some staff from environmental ed, as well as aquatics as well, for representation.
Would it be possible to include community members or coaches or other people who might be, I would wonder if we would want to have community members in those task force, or at least some sort of community engagement around this process.
President Forney, Commissioner Mentz. Yes, I think probably not in the building of the system, but definitely doing some community engagement to bounce off what we're thinking of doing. I think that what we learned in the stakeholder meetings, which we had several of them, and we had every single free site, people who were impacted by it internally, and a lot of what they brought up were things they heard from the community. And they, the confusion, the marketing, it's hard to navigate this particular program, things like that. So I think we got a starting grasp, but yes, we are committed to bouncing off, hey, what do you think about this? This is what we're working towards, and getting some input that way as well. We will have a plan to do that.
Thank you for that answer. I still think it would be really helpful to have community directly involved in that process because it's going to impact them. So it's just a suggestion. The other thing I want to clarify, and I think it's an assumption that people aren't showing up because it's free, and I think that that's a wrong assumption for us all to make as commissioners. I think that we also need to think that there might be other factors that are involved in them not showing up. Could be that they don't feel included. Could be a lack of communication around the program. So I think that cost is important, and making things, this is an important thing for us to figure out. But I really think we're trying to think about these things as line items to check off. And this is deciding whether or not and how we're offering programming and opportunities for young people and older people to engage needs to have the community involved. And I don't understand how we need to communicate. And when 15 people don't show up, that's because we haven't actually communicated maybe that they should, that they're on that program. I find that sometimes that is a really big piece. So working on how we're using all of the staff we have in recreation to communicate more effectively with the people who are registering for programming, I think it should be a priority of the task force, not just thinking about the numbers on these pages, because the numbers can work out whatever way we want them to. This is values, and this is about how we serve the young people and the older generations in our community around recreation. So, and I know that my commissioner friends are probably a little bit upset with me right now, but this is very, very important. And whether or not we offer free programming or how we do it is essential to the future of recreation in our system. So I think we do need to have difficult discussions, and the format we are in right now is not really facilitative of that. So I hope that we can start to, have these conversations in a way that helps move the $100 million that we provide to the city. So.
Thank you, Vice President Bene.
I was just gonna, if,
Oh, sorry.
yes, President Forney, Commissioner Mins, I respect, your responses with that piece, and I just want you to know that this process is intentional. We have talked to staff, we got feedback, which they were very impressed and happy and excited that we had even had conversations about that, because they are working directly with these families. And I do want to clarify, I know that's just one component of, I know there can be other factors, and that's what that task force is intentionally trying to figure out, how we can serve the community in the best way to do that. So, thank you.
Vice President Bene.
Thank you, President Forney. And I think one way we can do some real good is by being able to deliver on the service. And so it looks to me like what you've laid out there is a path to delivering this, and delivering this at the needs levels that are out in the community. So while it's, process work, it's important, and it's a way to reach people. So I say keep checking that box. I'm glad, and I've been around the rec center directors and so on. They very much know their community, as far as I can tell, and can speak to the family's experiences and stuff like that. So one of the notes I had, Ms. Hernandez, was you said something about training for consistency. Yes, yes, yes. And not everything has to be perfect at the rec center, but around this program, that's one, doing that would be amazing. Because what we want to do, I think what all the commissioners, want to do, is maximize this work with the community. So I just really I wrote that down when you said it, I liked it. And then I have a dumb question, but ActiveNet, is there a mobile version? Because, when I sign up for pickleball, I go on my computer, so is there a mobile app for ActiveNet? And can people sign up on their phones? Because I think most people have phones, while most people might not have computers. Okay, we don't know.
We don't know.
Okay.
But we can definitely find out.
I
and
would love
report
to
back.
know that.
Yes.
Because I think that's to me a real access issue, because I do think most people have phones. There is also always the option to go to the rec center and sign up in person, or probably call in and things like that. Okay.
Sure.
Commissioner Mears.
And I have one more question, is that okay?
Nope. Go ahead. It is okay.
My last question was, there were the Rec Plus numbers on there, and the statement was that it's up by 50%. Are we full? Are rec center programs full and waitlisted? Yes, I'm seeing nods. Okay.
President Forney, Vice President Abeni, yes, there are multiple sites that are full. There are some sites that still have availability and slots. It just depends on the site.
But mostly it's full.
It's mostly full.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Mans, wants to acknowledge.
Musich. Thank you,
Georgia
President
Six.
Forney. I just wanted to share with my colleagues, yes, you can utilize ActiveNet on your phone. I register for OpenSwim on ActiveNet on my phone every year, so you can do it. It is possible. You don't need an app. It's mobile browser friendly.
Good information. Thank you. Commissioner Olson?
Yeah, thanks. So just kind of wanted to underline Commissioner Menz's points around, the no-shows and kind of looking into that data, because I think, partly the theory behind originally providing free programming was that it's reducing the main barrier that folks have to participating in our youth programs. And our goal is to get as many youth into these programs as possible because we know how beneficial they are. And so it's kind of sounding like a lot, we've heard, you gave some examples of how folks would sign up for multiples and then go to different ones. And otherwise it seems like folks who no-showed it was kind of like a flippant, it was free and we decided not to do it. And so, but what that tells me is that perhaps, the fees were not the greatest barrier between folks participating in our programming. And so I would really encourage the task force, our rec supervisors, folks running these programs to look into that no-show data more, because that could really reveal to us, it's because of, transportation, it's because we didn't feel safe going there, it's because of this family stuff, whatever it could be. Because again, our goal is to get as many kids into these programs as possible. So would really like to get into the exact details to that, because it could identify some barriers that maybe we're not aware of aside from fees. So thank you.
President Forney, Commissioner Olson, yes, thank you for that valued feedback, and we do have that on our radar with the task force, to possibly do some surveys. It's part of the research, if you will, part of our plan and our outline. So, and we'll see, what the reasoning is and how we can overcome it and accommodate people better.
Commissioner Schaefer?
Yeah, it's exciting to think that we can potentially, roll this out citywide to some degree. I just want to reiterate kind of my perspective when some of these initiatives come forward for board approval. What I would be looking for is this has been extremely disruptive to our budget the last 2 years, and it's been painful. I know it's been painful for a lot of staff areas. It's been painful for the commissioners. We don't want to experience that again, right? So I would roll it way back and say, we're gonna start small, right? Before we overcommit again. Because potentially rolling out citywide, we could overcommit, right? And so I think we've got to dial it back in a way that is gonna build the trust, build the relationship moving forward. And in a way that's sustainable. And I'd like to see numbers so that we don't have a surprise. I'd like to see, potential estimates of what we're going to expect when we do this. Because we don't want to be in another situation times 5, right? So I am excited about this, but I think we've got to think about a way to really, maybe it's online is pay, sign up free at the center. So it's more community-based, grabbing those people that really may have that need. But I don't want to see it, I want to start small and sustainable and relationship-based and not trying to get over our skis.
President Forney, Commissioner Schaefer, we appreciate that feedback, and some of the feedback from the stakeholder group included comments like that, as far as perhaps, because the park staff really know who the people who need these services or this financial break, who they are. And so if there was an in-person thing or things to consider like that, we have talked about that as a group, and I'm sure the task force will be talking about it further.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, President Forney. I was just feeling really left out that I didn't give input. No, I'm joking, but after everyone's spoken, I'm like, oh, it changed like 8 times what I was going to try to say. I wrote down registration ? And what I meant by that, hopefully I remember, is it is not, okay, let's form my question properly. To create a space, I think the ActiveNet thing is good to think about. Working with kids, of course, like every day, and families who don't necessarily understand these different things. There's just a lot of click and drag and punch, and that's sort of what we're competing against. And I'm wondering that, I mean, I'm sure, as Commissioner Olson touched on too, that might play into some of these duplicate enrollments, blah, 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 because people are just trying to, well, I should do here, do there. If we had a universal space of registration, and this goes to how we implement this in the budget, would we, and maybe this is 25, maybe this is 26, would we have to like pay for a whole new big dump of a new software, of a new ActiveNet, or is this something that we can pivot with and work with in terms of what we have now? And I'm just thinking, for all the things, it's not just the free programming and youth, but just like if we synergized everything to a singular location to do our registrations, would that mean new software and having to dive into something like that, or is that something that we can utilize with ActiveNet and just try to, encourage the public, like, hey, you can do this from your phone too, or blah, blah, blah? Does my question make any sense at all? I was trying to take in everybody's points.
Combined, a combo. President Forney and Commissioner Thompson, yes, that makes sense, and I think, our work that will be coming to the board soon on centralized registration for youth sports is gonna be a good way for us to kind of flush this out with, if you will, because we are gonna use ActiveNet for that model. And, I'm sure there will be some kinks that we need to work out, and then it would be back to ActiveNet for development, or hopefully it works just fine and we're able to manage it through this one piece of all registration. So there is hope that, bearing what happens with that, how we can move forward with all of the registration and programs.
Do we do it separately now? Thank you for that, sorry. Do we do it separately, like for the if you're just doing like a team sport versus like the free, do we do it separately, or is it?
For youth, it's all through ActiveNet. They register at their park. For adults, there's, the whole team comes in and there's a different software that's used. It just depends on what the programming is. But in general, we're using ActiveNet for all of our registration as much as possible. Rec Plus has their own registration program that is the same as what the public schools have, called LEO. And it just fits their needs more as far as data compilation and some of the logistics of registration for a child care program.
Thank you.
Deputy Superintendent Ringel, did you want to address something?
Yeah, thank you, President Forney. I will say that at one point we tried to put everything into one software. What we find is user groups of particular different activities, say golf or ice, have specialized software that they like to use that's specific to that type of use. And so we have over time, we have LEO, which sits in its own space and actually matches up with the cities, or the city of, the Minneapolis Public Schools, which is another pressure we get, is wanting one spot for everybody to be able to register between the schools and the parks. We've pulled off the golf for Club Profit. We've got different program for ice. And in order to have one program solve everything means that no one program might be served well. So there is some level of specification unless you have full-time programmers internally trying to recreate a program that the software manufacturer hasn't been able to do for us. And ActiveNet 2 is a complete rebuild. So we took it all the way down to the bottom and rebuilt it up. So the first time we did it, we wanted everything in it, which meant we had a lot of kind of issues across the system. And then we also weren't specific enough about how we wanted things to be categorized, so you could have 4 different ways to talk about tiny tots, right? So it is a rebuilt system, the way they would build one today versus what we tried to do when we initially launched it.
Thank you for that information. Commissioner Menz for a second time.
Thank you, President Forney. Question, so this is even before the Rec Plus numbers came up. I had this question for today. Have we considered Rec Plus expansion in the Recreation Department and whether or not that would be revenue generation or loss? I mean, I think that the Rec Plus program is probably one of our most popular programs in the city, provides really great service, and it's not always free. And I think that that's a good place for us to look at some revenue. Have we
President Forney, Commissioner Mintz, yes, we're in the process of kind of doing a deep dive, if you will, into the Rec Plus program and its structure, and just how we can better serve the families. And there are some areas that have long waiting lists. It's a lot of work to implement another site. You know, there's certifications and things that need to happen, and it impacts maintenance in other areas of our organization. So, but it's definitely something that we're thinking through how we can better the program and meet the needs of, you know, the people who are wanting that service.
The other question I had was, you know, we struggle with people signing up or not getting enough people or people not showing up. That's one thing. But what are we doing, and maybe as you're considering and going through this task force, you know, I really don't have any qualms about where the programming comes from. I want Minneapolis kids in Minneapolis parks playing. So I wonder if like partner programs, you know, can utilize those spaces. How do we make that more effective for those programs as well? And how do we encourage more of those programs to work with our parks? Because if they're getting kids there that maybe we're not, or maybe we're between the schools, or sometimes different cultural communities, it might be easier to have other groups programming that. How are we gonna be able to maybe offer opportunities for those groups to be utilizing our park spaces, because those are Minneapolis residents too, most of the time. And it's sometimes micro-entrepreneurial. And I think that we need to try and, we can't program our way out of it to get more kids in there. We need to partner with other groups, and how do we look for advantages there? So is there, hopefully the task force will look at that.
President Forney, Commissioner Mintz. So I am part of a group with Hennepin County Libraries as well as Community Ed. That's how we were having discussions about the free programs. And so we have been in conversations with that group of how we can enhance and even do similar trainings together, how we can work together about like what programs are happening, and engaging the staff so they can have better relationships as well too. So we are in the conversations with Community Ed and Hennepin County Libraries with some of those pieces as well.
And do we have any numbers on whether or not groups that program in our parks have like these issues? Do they make revenue from the people? Like how does Pearl Park or Lyndhurst or the councils or Phelps, how is their attendance rate? Is it better? Do they program and they don't register through us? So how do we figure that? How does that reconcile? Do we include them as stakeholders?
President Forney, Commissioner Mintz, again, I can't right now. We're in that process of looking at that information and collaboration and how we can work together, and that could be part of that conversation that I ask in some of those network meetings that I'm in with that group.
And Director Hernandez, I think you're doing an amazing job. So my questions are because I have a limited amount of time to communicate to as many people in the organization as possible, and this is really important stuff. So if it appears I'm being direct or harsh, it's not. It's that there are questions that need to be asked, and this is the only forum that I know to ask them besides making phone calls constantly throughout the day. So I appreciate you answering my questions. I'm a willing partner. Please engage me. Please engage the community in this work. It is extremely important.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Musich for a second time.
Thank you, President Forney. So I'm hearing from my colleagues some hesitation to see us rolling this out citywide as a pilot. And I would just like to remind us that we do continually message to people, if you're a child that can't afford to participate in our program, we'll find a way for you to do so. So this is just operationalizing what we say is our mission and our goal. And so as much as I don't want to put us in a precarious budget position, I do also want to put our process and our policies in line with what we say we do. So I would hope that people will think about that as we consider what's being brought forward from staff. And I hear Commissioner Menz asking for more sites because Rec Plus is very popular, but in the past, we've been very cautious about expanding that program because we do not want to harm small entrepreneurs that are providing that service in community. So we try to only offer it in locations where there is a lot of demand that isn't being met in other ways. And so I would hope that as we consider expansion, that we are also considering what the availability is in that community in other locations and whether or not we would impact the ability of those small businesses to be able to continue to function in a profitable way and keep their employees and staff in place. So I would just ask that that be part of what we consider. I know we have in the past, and I would hope that it's still part of the way that we think about it moving forward. And I think that was all I had, so thank you.
Thank you for really robust discussion, but also for what you're doing. One thing that I think might have been touched on just a bit, and that is the impact of the schools. They're going through some huge budget issues as well, and how we are keeping our eyes open to how it's going to impact us. I mean, what is it, Phillips School? They're no longer going to be funding that. Anyway, I just hope that we're including them as a stakeholder, and I just want you to know that I met with the council president, and he indicated anything that he can do to help bridge some of the funding between schools and parks. So I didn't get it in writing, but anyway, just thought I'd mention that. Anyway, not seeing any more lights. Are we at break time? Oh, no, we have one more, excuse me. Okay, I wrote over your stuff, sorry. Director Wiseman, we have all funds, is it, Paul, welcome.
Good evening, President Forney and Commissioners. I'm going to take a look at 5-year projections for the Park Board operating funds. And we'll start with the Special Revenue Fund. So the Special Revenue Fund contains funds that are dedicated to a specific purpose, and the revenue is for a specific purpose. The Grant and Dedicated Revenue Fund has items like community events, Red, White, and Boom. It has Teen Teamworks grant funding. Some of the funds that Director Wiseman was showing, like the Lupient scholarships and the Recreation Fund, are in there. So it's really just a placeholder fund, and it's adjusted during the year. So you see there's not really much changes, but the one change to that fund is the ARPA funding for trees is ending in 2024, so the budget is decreasing by $500,000. The Natural Areas Management Fund is a new fund in 2024, and it's expected to get inflationary increases for wages and other expenses from the lottery in lieu O&M funds, which in the past have increased every year. The next fund we'll look at is internal service funds. So these are services provided to other park board funds. So any kind of changes you see here will also impact the funds they provide services to. And that will mainly be the biggest impact on the general fund and also the enterprise fund. So the equipment services budget is projected to increase in 2025, and that is due to the price of equipment. We've seen about a 35% increase in the cost of equipment since 2019. In 2024, to balance the budget, equipment purchases were deferred. So we'll have to increase the budget to pay for the more expensive equipment. Information technology services budget, one of the drivers of their projection is the continued addition of cameras and security, the door access and security cameras program. Self-insurance fund is expecting to have to increase the budget in 2025 due to changes in state law around workers' compensation, and so those may lead to increased payouts. And all of those changes will impact the general fund. The enterprise fund accounts for business type activities of the park board. And most of these projections are just based on percentage increases for wages and other expenses, contracts, supplies, and also increases in revenue just based on a 2.5% increase. So what these will show you as some areas like, say, ice arenas are going to have to make changes, and that every year the department directors come with new revenue ideas, fee changes, expense adjustments. So the estimates are just based on a kind of continuing operations, but every year there'll be new initiatives to increase revenues or decrease expenses. So you'll see the sculpture garden, we would expect something to come forward to try to get to break even or make a profit. And waterworks, although the budget is showing a loss, the restaurant has been really successful. And if that continues, the revenue budget will increase, and there'll also be another phase to waterworks. So this chart shows enterprise fund total net income and what we use that for, which is capital improvements and debt service. And as the debt service is being paid off, and I think 2030 will be the last year of parade ice debt, one more year off this chart, that will leave more income for capital improvements. And the reserve balance is pretty healthy, but there will be a lot of expenses and improvements needed. And another new fund, or another enterprise fund, was established in 2024 for stormwater. And for these 5-year projections, we are just showing inflationary increases. But right now, the park board's working with a consultant to develop a stormwater management program. And there could be additional increases for that program in the future. Right, and Director, that's the presentation for those funds, and Director Wiseman is going to go over the general fund 5-year projections.
President Forney and commissioners, I'm going to be showing three different scenarios as you start to think about the decisions and the input that you'll be making in this budget process. So the first one I call fully loaded. So it includes, on that budget needs document, it includes all the strategic direction funding needs, the budget issues that had estimated cost. We included all of those. We fixed the inflationary issues in the first year, including compensation, increasing compensation. We accelerated property tax for the youth investment. And then, of course, the system equity investment is built in for Graco, Upper Harbor Terminal, and North Commons Park. So this is what we discussed during the budget issues conversation, the pre-retreat conversation that we had at the last board meeting. So you'll see a fully loaded budget for 2025 would require a 13.87% property tax levy increase, and would also require almost a 6% increase in 2026. So now I'm going to show you a general fund 5-year projection that I'm calling bare bones. So it has none of the strategic funding needs included. Budget issues with estimates only included mandated and compensation adjustments. Fixed inflation over the course of the 5-year projection rather than the first year. Did not fund the accelerated property tax for the youth investment, which would mean we would have to identify another one-time funding source to cover that gap, but does include the system equity investment for Graco, Upper Harbor Terminal, and North Commons. So with that, with shifting some of those costs between 25 and 26, eliminating some of those costs, we get down to just below 9% for 2025, and we increase to almost 7% for 2026. So the final the final 5-year projection I want to provide is one that would show a tax increase and a need for operating reductions. So again, I'm not making any decisions for the board, but for the point of modeling this for you, I said if the board direction was that we would not raise property taxes greater than 7% in 25 and 26, so that's what I'm using in this modeling. I selected some of the strategic funding needs to be funded over that 2-year period, paused others, budget issues and estimates, funded some of those, split some of those, again, between 25 and 26. Accelerated property tax for youth investment is not funded, and I did still include the system equity investment. With just identifying a few things that we potentially would want to fund, we can very quickly and easily get to a place where we have operating reductions of over $2 million in the first year. And then by the end, and then in 2026, it would be an additional 900,000. So in total, over the 2 years, we would have to have operating reductions in, approximately $3 million. So again, I just picked and chose a couple of things just to model it and show you what the impact might be. So as you consider these different scenarios or start to think through some of these different scenarios, think about them when you're working through your priority exercise after the break. When you hear the city's assessor's report on 2024, on April 24th, think about this. And as you prepare for day 2 of the budget retreat, where we will be providing, where we will be asking for direction on the maximum property tax levy request. And my plan for day 2 will be to take the information from today and try to model model a 5-year projection based on some of the themes and recommendations that we are seeing from this work that we do today. Questions?
Yep, Commissioner Musich.
Thank you, President Forney. Director Wiseman, in the examples you've given us today, is this assuming that property values have remained steady from last year? Because I think we all know that that's not the case. We're seeing pretty significant declines in commercial property values, and then not significant, but declines again in residential property values, which I assume is going to have a pretty significant impact on our budgetary collections in terms of property taxes, which, as I think you've told us, is nearly our entire budget. So are these numbers taking into consideration those decreases, or are we anticipating that these numbers are going to change based on the numbers the assessor's office is going to tell us the 24th?
So President Forney and Commissioner Musich, we levy a dollar amount. So as commercial property values decrease, the burden shifts in how that dollar amount is spread. And so a 7% property tax increase is going to be felt heavier on the residential side in 25 and 26. And I think you all, as city residents, you can remember some of those days when that shift was, and property tax increase maybe increased 5%, but your property tax bill increased 10 or 11%. So I think, so that's the type of information and the type of questions you can be asking the city assessor on April 24th.
Thank you for level setting that for us. I appreciate it. I had forgotten that we're levying a dollar amount versus a percentage of property taxes being collected. So thank you for that.
Commissioner Menz.
I thought Commissioner Benny was up. Thank you for asking that question, Commissioner Musich. It's like a bubble, and we'll have to ask that question. Why no offer? So it appears that we're going to have to cut, to me. So are there going to be, like, will the staff be able to look at specific places where we're, like, this is kind of general. I mean, will the staff be bringing suggestions to us, and then how, I guess through the amendment process, we would suggest those, or through this process of budget, strategic goals?
President Forney and Commissioner Menz, just as in a budget where we do not see an operating deficit, this board provides us with your priorities, and the superintendent tries to build in or address those priorities into the budget process. So you were provided your priority worksheet prior to this meeting. We will be asking you to think about what things you would like to protect during this year's budget to help provide direction to the superintendent as he develops the superintendent's recommended budget.
Not seeing any other lights, I believe it's break time. Almost perfect, 3 minutes off. Okay, so a recess.
Turned it off when you said that, so I don't know.
Yeah,
if anyone
that's
in the
okay.
audience heard you. We're recessing for 15 minutes in case you didn't hear Meg.
Yeah, no, you're making good points. Yeah, I think let's see what we got. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, prep meeting a little bit more. No, I get it. I don't think it. I was happy that it didn't really take that long.
Okay, gang. I'd like to reconvene our board meeting. I didn't adjourn it before, but.
You recessed.
Did I? I don't, okay.
We'll take a 15-minute recess.
Oh. We are reconvened.
Thank you, President Forney. We will get into the part of the agenda where you'll get up, move around a little bit, so I think that'll probably feel pretty good. So let's talk a little bit about where we've been in terms of strategic directions, where we're at in terms of performance goals and priority comp plan strategies. And then we're going to get an opportunity to work a little bit on how you might categorize some of the budget needs that have been put forward to you. And we'll be able to do a little bit work on the commissioner priorities exercise. So just as way of thinking back to when we were at North Mississippi Regional Park working on hopes, hurdles, and highways, these are some of the sticky notes that you put forward at that point. These eventually came forward into your strategic directions and performance goals. And really, when we started this work together, we were in a spot where we had a fresh new comprehensive plan, 2021 to 2036, and it includes 9 goals and 149 strategies. So we talked a lot about the strategic direction process and the performance goal process being an opportunity to say what of that document is the priority for this, essentially this commissioner term. And we were able to craft strategic directions and then determine from those strategic directions which of those priority comp plan strategies would be part of this 4-year term. We ended up with 5 strategic directions, 37 priority strategies, 15 performance goals, and that's actually 22 budget actions. One thing that I will say is that those budget actions, those are 4-year documents for the most part. There's been, I think, at least one added that's a single one, and that's around the free programming, which you were working on earlier tonight. What I will say is that every performance goal has one budget action. So there's a 4-year plan for each of those performance goals. But we don't have within those performance goals something that could be assigned to every director. And we wanted one budget action for every director. That's why you have slightly more budget actions than you have performance goals. And some of your directors have upwards of maybe 4 to 5 performance goals that they are tracking. So there's, everybody has at least one, but if you have a little higher number. We have some brand new tools to be able to have you see the activity happening online around your performance goals and budget actions. I'm going to give you the short tour, but Carrie Christensen and Madeline Hudak will be here at the next board meeting, so next week on the 24th, and they're going to give you a more robust tour as well as an opportunity. Communications will be handing out the annual report for 2023, so you're going to get kind of a pretty comprehensive status report on things next week. So if you were to go to our website and you were to go to About Us, you probably have in the past gone to this part of the website. Can you see my, okay, I just wanted to make sure you could see the arrow. So that strategic directions area, we've had that populated for quite a while with your strategic directions and your performance goals. But there's now kind of a robust Parks for All implementation tracking section. On that page, there are actually 3 dashboards. The one I'm going to preview to you tonight is the one for Parks for All implementation dashboard. And this is kind of the most specific, and it speaks directly to your performance goals and your budget actions. So it is very close to the to-dos that are getting done within your time period here. When you open that up, you will see this as your base slide. And you can see that there's some summary pages, there's some plan highlights, but the 2 things in particular I would want you to go in and kind of play with a little bit. One is that performance goals, and the one right underneath it, which is the budget actions. So when you click on performance goals, Ta-da! All 15 of your performance goals show up. Yeah, pretty exciting. All of your performance goals are 4-year performance goals. So you can see in some cases there's 25% in the purple. Those are complete for the first year. The green reflects in progress, and the gray reflects not initiated. So you're starting to see the first year of some of those performance goals getting to complete, and most of your performance goals being initiated for that 2024 year. The details of those performance goals show up in your budget. You approve kind of the accomplishments of them through the budget process. You also, when you get your budget action report on a quarterly basis, you can also see the details within there. So if you want to know the specifics of what's getting done versus whether it's in progress or initiated or complete, you have that ability. On this page, I can't do it now because this is a static shot of the page, but you have the ability to search by department lead. So if you want to see which directors have 4 or 5 that they're working on, you can do that, and you can see which ones are theirs. You can see how it relates to a particular year. So there's some ways you can filter those pages down at the bottom as well. You also have all of the budget actions on. Now, these are organized by the priority strategy versus a name for that particular budget action. So you have to go to the last page of this, this dashboard to correlate it. We might, over time, actually change that so that the words are more associated with the specific action and the budget action, but we're still playing with that a little bit. But this is where you will see 22 of them. One of them is at the bottom, slid underneath this page. And as you might expect, because they have some overlap with the performance goals, you're seeing quite a few of them in progress, quite a few of them with their first year complete. This one, I happen to know, this 9.1 research and implement, that is the strategy that's related to the programming budget goal that you reviewed tonight. And the reason why it's in progress all across it is there's just 1 year of that particular one versus 4 years. So you can go in, you can check these out. Really thankful to Carrie and Madeline for all of their work in creating this so you can start to see things live. This will get updated quarterly so you can see how it moves on a quarterly basis. And you can get it to it right from our website. All right, so now we get into the exercises. We've devised this in a way where if you need to, you can do a little bit of work at your desk before you would go up and do some collective work. And we've tried to build in enough time so that if you need just a little bit of space to sit at your desk and do the work, a little bit of time to go up there, and then a little bit of time for us to actually start to look at where the patterns are, we've got enough time to do that. The large spreadsheets, you should all have one of these. This was also in the packet of information that Julie sent out to you last Friday. But there are really 3 key sections to it. So the first page of this is around what are those kind of revenue, what are those system aspects that staff have identified and I believe were introduced to you at the last board meeting as budget issues or budget needs. And you've got 3 opportunities here of things you could say that you could give us direction on. Whether or not this is something that is a topic you want us to consider as a property tax increase as we think about the budget development process, something that you would say still really want it, but it's going to have to come at the expense of a cut somewhere else within the organization. So if you'd be looking at, if you want to indicate that, you'd be saying a service level reduction, or maybe something you're like, well, maybe I would consider that a one-time. If you say nothing, we would assume that you just don't support it, right? And so then it's not a service level, it's not a property tax, it's not a one-time, and it's something that we're likely looking to eliminate that within the system. On the next page, this is where we start digging into those performance goals and budget actions that you've requested. These are those additional costs we anticipate we will need to incur over the next 2 years to complete those performance goals. Again, you have that opportunity of property tax or service level reduction, but you also have a pause component. We're going to be paying very close attention to things where you say pause or service level reduction. And we might need to come back to you to say, okay, then we need to reframe, we need to have you reapprove that particular performance goal. And the reason being is because the superintendent's contract, by that contract, he is evaluated on the organization's performance to getting these done. And if we're in a situation where those things aren't going to be funded, we would need to recalibrate what he's evaluated against and what the organization is held accountable to. So it's totally okay to make that choice. It's just it will also trigger some additional board actions in order to recalibrate that work so that it's a fair representation of what you would then be asking the organization to complete. The last page is a series of one-time costs and expenses. And you have that same consideration here in terms of property tax, service level reduction, or pause and revisit in 2027. We've already had the question of, boy, I would like to not have to make a solid choice on everything. I'd like to be able to say maybe a little bit here, maybe a little bit there, and not be in kind of these extreme choices. What we can do to accommodate that is you do have the paper copy. If you have some more nuanced suggestions on how to manage your intent around these activities, we would ask you to write it on this document, put your name on it, and hand it in at the end so that we'd be able to use that in our work to try to meet your needs in the budget process. Okay, so there are 3 of them. There are 3 different sheets up on the wall. You each have a marker. Does everybody find their marker at their desk? Yeah, all right. Okay, so I'm sorry I didn't give you enough dots to put dots on everything. I would have struggled to find enough dots with enough colors. So the reason why you have a marker, and you each have a different color marker, is that when you go up to this, you just have to put a dot in the box that reflects your intent for that particular item. Your intent, sorry. So if you're like, okay, for youth funding gap, I want it to be property tax. You would use your marker to put a dot in the property tax box up there. And we will know if you are adding more dots to a specific box because because you have a specific color, or we will know if you've done dots across the row. So you really should try to just put 1 dot per row and put your nuance items in writing on here, right? Like if you're like, well, actually I would have liked to split these between the 2 things, put your nuance on here, but put your kind of your highest value item up there. How are we doing? Okay. I think we'll get through that, and then we're going to take a moment to revisit this document. And I think there were some really important questions asked as we went through that kind of the fund projections, is that this is a year where we have to understand as much as what you might want in terms of new things or things that are in the pipeline, as well as what you would prioritize not to cut. Right? We are going to have likely a tough year where we're trying to figure out anywhere from $2 to $3 million worth of cuts within the system. And so if you've got things that you feel are important, right? I don't want things taken from this category. That's going to be important to reflect in this work and on that priority sheet. So maybe be thinking of that as well a little bit as you fill out the big paper, and we'll certainly revisit that when you get to the little paper. Okay. Commissioner Schaefer has a question. So Meg, I'll let you direct this.
Yes. Commissioner Schaefer.
Just for a review, this is the full board, so if we were to take everything on this sheet and everything on the wall, that's the 13% tax increase. If we were to put everything in the property tax column. I'm just trying to get a sense of like how many, like, okay, if we want to hit the 7% range, like Julie suggested, is it $2 million that we should, you know, be not marking, don't support?
Yeah, one second, because there is one kind of batch of things that are the additional commissioner directives that have been given through resolution that aren't in here, but was that enough of a dollar value, or was that more hours?
Those were more staff.
Okay, so Julie, actually, I'll let you.
Okay, President Forney and Commissioner Schaefer, the first thing I want to clarify is that in the 13.87%, it included everything on pages 1, the page numbers are, the budget page 1 and page 2. That is the 13.87%. The one-time costs are nowhere as of yet. And the conversation about the one-time costs is we know that we do not have excess general fund balance to fund some of these one-time costs. So one option for some of these, for the last one, security alarm panels, they want to replace 16 sites per year over 5 years. So we could build that into property taxes for 5 years, knowing that at the end of the 5 years, we'd be more on a standard replacement process, and that dollar amount can be backed out a little bit. Same with the network infrastructure, converting those over several years. You could just add that into the property taxes if that was your priority. Or you can say, we want to do these things. We find these things important, but we want you to find within your budget what other capital outlay would you pause for those 5 years in order to get this accomplished. So that's where that service level reduction comes in, that column. So I just wanted to clarify that.
So we should think about not checking. If we want to not have the 13%, we shouldn't put property tax for every single one of these.
Correct.
We need to be a little judicious. And then was it about roughly 2 million? I'm trying to get, what was the middle ground level as far as reductions? Like if from this to the middle, like if we had a ballpark in our mind, oh, I hit $1 million, that should be good enough to bring us. I mean, you might not be looking at it this level of detail either. So I'm just.
Yeah, President Forney and Commissioner Schaefer, that'll be a little bit more difficult. When I did that final kind of modeling, I just picked and chose different things.
Gotcha.
And so, and I didn't really calculate what that dollar amount was to say, so that's the work that we will do in day 2, once we get all of the feedback from the commissioners, then we'll be able to do a model based on your input.
Thank you. And then I just had one other question. If we have something that we'd like to see as a budget add, would you prefer us to put these on the bigger sheet so that all commissioners could see those now, or would you prefer those to be private so you could get feedback from other commissioners on those items? Or would you prefer those on the worksheet and turned in?
Thank you, President Forney, Commissioner Shaver. I would put them on the priority sheet.
Okay.
And we'll share that with commissioners prior to the second retreat so that everybody can see it.
Great.
I'm not just going to ask another logistical question. So on the big sheets, should we be using our color?
On the ones that you have at your desk, you can use whatever writing tool you prefer.
Good,
And the ones
because-
up there, use the markers.
Good, because they bleed through, and that could be. Okay, I think that was the only question I had. I can't remember who went first, but I'll say Commissioner Musich.
Okay, thank you, President Forney. I have a question about page 2E. ARPA funding is ending at 12/31/24. Need to increase general fund budget to plant 2 trees for every tree removed. Is that $500,000 number after we take into consideration any funds we have available from selling carbon credits, or is that number not included in here at all?
President Forney and Commissioner Musich, that number has not been put in at all yet. I believe the balance, I was going to double check the actual balance, but 113,000. So it's been building up, and we might want to let it build up for, a few years before we start programming it into an operating budget.
Okay. And the reason that it's only in 1 year, the 500,000, is because we would increase it in that year, and then we wouldn't need to increase it in future years.
Correct. It becomes part of the current service level.
Okay. I appreciate the thought about banking it for another day, but when we're dealing with budget cuts, it feels like it might behoove us to expend some of those funds for this purpose and push out the increase to a future year. But that's just, I guess I'll have to think about that. The other question I had was, I love all the work we're doing with Power BI. It's really helpful in terms of having a dynamic way to look at information and pick and choose what it is you're trying to see. Is there any thought being given to having exercises like this in the future be assisted via a Power BI tool that we'd be able to then pick and choose what pieces we want and help it some? I mean, I know Power BI can do it. So have we thought about that? Are we thinking about ways to have more interactive, real-time budgeting tools available for ourselves to be able to utilize to help figure out the impacts potentially of what we're proposing?
President Forney, Commissioner Musich, we are looking at ways to always have it be a little bit more responsive. We can definitely look at the Power BI and the capacity that we have, because each kind of budget cycle now, we've been doing something a little bit different. And so I think in fairness to staff, we'd want to get a pretty consistent methodology, so they just have to build it once and maybe modify it a little bit in future years. But yeah, we can definitely explore that.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Menz.
Thank you, President Forney. I had a question about specifically like an action that I'm not seeing, and I'm wondering, because I was sitting with at Awamni this week with the Indigenous Council that was created, and there was some questions around continuing that funding of our Indigenous Park Liaison. Would that be something that I would put on this sheet? It's not currently in our budget for 25-26. It would have to go, okay, thank you very much.
Vice President Benny.
Thank you, President Forney. Just quickly, let's see, Deputy Superintendent Ringgold. If we leave something blank, so we can leave one of these blank on this one, it just means, I mean, because if we are okay with getting rid of something, we could also check maybe service level reduction, or should we just leave it blank?
Yeah, I would say that's a really great question. So I guess if we get 0 dots up there, we'll assume it's not a priority to incorporate either through a service reduction or a one-time or a property tax. If you could be so kind as to actually put that on your sheet in terms of what your thinking is, that would be great.
Thank you.
Not seeing any of the lights? Oh, Commissioner.
One clarification again about what we put on here versus over there.
Very good. So, President Forney, Commissioner Schaefer, on there, we just want to see dots.
Okay.
So we don't want to see any extra words on there, just dots. On here, anything you want to do to explain kind of your thinking on it is very welcome.
Okay. And then additionally, do you want our sheets that we filled out before the meeting?
We do, but we'll cover that after this part's
Bingo.
done.
Okay. All right, go for it, gang.
And you've got time, so don't feel rushed. All right, looks like we have accomplished the dots. So when we move into this next part, I'm going to spend a little bit of time tallying the dots so I can give you some kind of high-level reporting on them. And while I'm doing that, I'll have all of you focus your attention on the priority sheet. So, yep, so I've seen a few people flash them. So you might have had one when you got here, or you might have one at your desk, a fresh one. So on the top is something that you would have done either when you got here today or prior to being here. And then on the second part of it is really kind of the intent of, as you've been through the process today, would you have a different thinking on it? Would you make any changes to it? So it's kind of that before and after. So I encourage you to, do that part first, but keep kind of on top of mind, I think, that important question of not only what you might add, but what you are trying to protect. And that protect piece is not something you've had to focus on quite as much as a board until this budget cycle. So making sure to focus on that. We've got 3 for you. We'd ideally love it to stay that concise, but don't feel like you can't use the back as well. And I'm going to go do some tallying while you finish that. All right, commissioners, you can still work on those till the end of the meeting, but I think I'll give you some initial observations, not quite as good as Power BI, but I'll give you some initial observations of what the dots look like. So when I look at kind of that first sheet, which was the budget needs quantified, there were a couple of areas that showed up really strongly for property tax increase. And maybe we can close the door out. Okay. And I would say the majority of the things that actually came up strongly for property tax increase revolved quite a bit around staffing. So system equity investment, annual wage increase, both had a 6. And things that were in the 4 category were health insurance, state family and medical leave program, and workers' comp, and legal fees. The areas where there was some interest in reducing service levels were the youth funding gap, part-time provisional wage, and data requests. I'd really like to get the data request. Let's go with that. There aren't a lot of strong one-time, although I will say the fees and charges came up with 3, and that was the highest dot number for the one-time. Next, we move on to those things that are related to your performance goals. And in this case, there's actually, I would say, quite a bit of movement towards pausing, and there might be more details in your reports that tell me a little bit more about that. But there was an interest in pausing the project manager and planning and the asset management one. There was interest in pausing the volunteerism staffing ad, interest in pausing the part-time graphics and photographer / videographer. Areas that showed increase in property taxes as being supported were really introducing a citywide free and reduced cost youth program strategy and tree canopy and system equity investment. When it gets to the one-times, there was a pretty consistent pause until 2027 pattern that showed up. In fact, there were only 4 dots across that whole slot of them that didn't end up in the pause until 2027. All right, with that, we have 2 more commissioners who will be putting input into this, Commissioner Rucker and Commissioner Alper. When we have that completely tallied, we'll send it out to all of you. And of course, we'll start using that for the preparation for the second day of the retreat. And with that, I will collect all of your materials after the board meeting.
Are we concluded?
Nope, I think there's a question and answer.
Oh, sorry. Yes, there is, sorry. Read your own agenda here, huh? So, any questions, comments? Commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Schaefer.
I guess I would be curious if we have a moment, and President would allow this, if I could hear if there were other people besides myself who had an interest in adding something to this list that would be, an insert. We did a lot of good work, but that you may have put on your priority sheet that you'd like to share with the group. But I'm asking if that would be appropriate.
It's fine by me, if it's fine by the rest of the board. Does anybody have anything that they were planning on adding? Commissioner Schaefer? You go
Well,
right
I
ahead.
did. So I'm willing to share this. And the reason I'm sharing it is because I think it's something that brings this whole board back to our election cycle. And as we think about this upcoming budget and the priorities that we have, I think that I would like to think of something that we could be really a big win for those of us who would like to consider running again for this role. And one of the things we heard a lot was maintenance. And as a citizen, when I think of the things that directly affect me when I'm using the park system, it's, how well are we mowing? Are we trimming the trees? And then it's also the condition of the pavement under my feet, whether I'm biking, whether I'm walking. And I really feel like we've done a lot of good work during this term around the life cycle asset work. And I would love to be able to say to constituents, we fully funded, or we almost fully funded what we know we need for our paths. And unfortunately, we don't have hardly any money for neighborhood paths. We all know that from our neighborhood parks. We've really made good progress on our regional parks, in the paved courts and trails. But when I looked at the difference between what was presented, what's needed for full funding, and where we're at on regional and sidewalk, there wasn't a huge differential. But I also believe it's an equity play for our neighborhood parks. Because right now we basically fund sidewalks, I think, around the perimeter, but not a lot of the internal paths. So that would mean some GIS support or, assessment, maybe additional assessment work, but then also maybe we wouldn't be able to fully fund neighborhood pavement, but we could begin a pot of money that would begin neighborhood pavement. So I'm just putting that out there. I'm not asking anybody to say A or nay, but I really feel like we're going to be a legacy board, in my opinion, this term, because of a lot of the good work that President Forney, Commissioner Benny, every single one of us sitting here have done. And maybe I'm getting greedy, but I want to really try to do what's best for the constituents. And I feel like pavement is something that's not very sexy, but it's a high need. So that's just my 2 cents. I'm sure everybody else has ideas as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Musich.
Thanks, President Forney. So I'm not suggesting on my sheet any adds to the budget, because I anticipate we're going to have quite a few cuts that are not going to be popular with the public already. But what I wanted to share with all of you were things that I thought were important to protect. Trees I already shared up there, but natural resources management is really intensely important to me. We've done a lot of work to expand the work they're doing there, and I want to make sure that we don't erode the expansions we've put in place. And then I also added rehabilitation work on here, and I think that ties a bit into what you're talking about. So perhaps we need to think about reducing some of the funding we're putting into full replacements of things in the coming year, and then maybe perhaps think more about expanding the amount of money we're putting towards rehabilitation to ensure that things are being brought up to a higher standard more quickly, because I too have been getting a lot of complaints about sidewalks that are just really impassable. For example, it's so bad that we just throw gravel down because the concrete is not concrete anymore. So anyway.
Commissioner Thompson.
Thanks, President Forney. Because it was asked, I will say I agree with that, and I told this to Commissioner Schaefer anecdotally, but it's so true, and I'm so grateful to staff. The little tennis court by my house got resurfaced at Victory Park last fall. Nobody could use it before the fall, but I was on a walk with my son last weekend, and there was a dad and his daughter playing tennis. I almost started crying. I have not seen anyone out there in 10 years use that court because it was so falling apart. So definitely those things matter. Me personally, before my term is out, I would love to be able to get money for softball fields, specifically for youth, specifically bluntly for girls. But I'm literally just speaking that into existence because I know that we have budget cuts. I know that we have a lot of priority needs. But if the question's asked, like, what's the priority to me, that is But that's, other than that, it's pretty much just trying to care for what we already have and, you know, that's all. Thanks.
Commissioner Mans?
I thank you, President Forney. I would like to echo Commissioner Thompson's. That's what I was going to suggest. With the work that's been going on in the fields TAC, and as we go into the athletic fields portion, there's been discussion around, you know, an adequate amount of improvement funding, and it sort of speaks to what you're saying, Commissioner Schaefer, and the fact that improving and maintaining what we have and being more efficient instead of building new big things, really making the things that we have, the assets that we have, and bring them up to a service level that can improve the experience for our people in the system. So one of the recommendations that's probably coming from the TAC in one way or another is, you know, a $200,000 or $500,000 fund over the next couple of years that addresses the softball directives that we've had, which, by the way, any softball improvements are also going to improve the experience for all youth baseball players, 12 years and under. So it's kind of a win there. I also really want to reiterate, as I said earlier, that it is uncertain, the funding for the Indigenous Parks Liaison position, and then also that work. I think that the staff, specifically Carrie Christensen and Carrie Day Espenwall and many others in the community, are seeing the park board reaching out and seeing the park board be authentic in discussions. And I think that not funding that work at this point would be difficult to accept for the Indigenous community and for the elders who really are hopeful for what's happening with the engagement that the staff has really done exceptionally well. So those are some of the things I had.
Any other, any other comments from people? So I just want to remind everybody, the worksheet or whatever we want to call it, the cheat sheet, the guide about racial equity, take it home and, you know, read it through and, you know, get some ideas of how we view things, because we've got some big decisions to take on May 1st. So see you guys all next week, but remember to put May 1st on your calendar. And I will declare the meeting adjourned.